Hello, and welcome to the Eerie Hour, the world's number one most cursed podcast. I think that is an accurate description because of the difficulty we've been having lately. It's either demonic succubus interference with my friend, or it's you being passed out, or having to find a charger for someone's stolen camera, or yes, the list goes on. Undeniable interference, I think, like deliberate interference, because, you know,
sabotage.
Yes, once it's a coincidence, twice I don't remember what it is twice, but third time that makes it a deliberate enemy action. Okay?
Indeed.
Yep. So tonight, Patrick and I will be discussing the phenomenon of human hunting, as in humans being hunted by other humans. Starting off, what do you think of the actual concept of human hunting?
It's a pretty crazy thing when you think about it. And especially that it's actually like in the modern day.
Yeah, it is. That was what surprised me, because I think what I just read about it, I read it on those Berg threads, right? Where I've showed you big charts where it has a whole list of conspiracy theories, and I saw Pacific Northwest human hunting. And while I didn't find much results from specifically Pacific Northwest human hunting in general, I was surprised to find that it has not really been that uncommon of an occurrence. So I guess we'll get into actual cases of human hunting having occurred. So specifically people who have done it. So Robert Hansen. Robert Hansen...
You're not going to want to go to Alaska after this.
Yep, no. Honestly, I had no will to go to Alaska in the first place, and after this, I think I want to go there even less. So, he would fly into remote areas in Alaska in his plane with women that he had kidnapped, where he would either just kill them when he got there, or he would set them loose in the woods, hunt them down for sport with his Mini-14. So they were flown in, murdered with either a Mini-14 or a knife, and he said he wasn't alone for all his murders, which is interesting, but he was the only one prosecuted in this case.
Yeah, I heard that too, yeah.
Yeah, so...
like people would pay him.
Yeah, that's the theory. That's the big theory. So, and not just an unsubstantiated one that has been held by the FBI since the 1970s. So, primarily he just targeted prostitutes and, basically people who society wouldn't really notice if they went missing. Like, you know, people like that, it wouldn't be uncommon for people of that background to just disappear, right? Or...
Yes.
And people don't really care for them, I guess. So, those who are primarily...
Vagrants and prostitutes are often murdered like that.
Yeah, I guess in the same way, like, really sick people will go off homeless people because, like, it's just an easier target. And when they're gone, no one really notice. So, in my opinion, the more interesting of the two serial killers I look into is Israel Keys. They don't actually know how many victims he took. He killed people all across the United States, including New York State, New Jersey, Vermont, and Alaska. And a hell of a lot of murders go on in Alaska due to basically it being really isolated and long hours without daylight. And I'll sort of expand on that in a bit. What I found really interesting as well is he really did treat this as his hobby, right? His hobby was to hunt people down. So, and he funded this through bank robbery. He committed lots of bank robberies across America, and he also took a hostage, I believe, at one point. That's how he had enough funding to do this sort of thing.
Ransomed it.
Yeah, so he would take people from national parks and remote areas, and they'd just be reported as missing, because I guess it's it's really, really easy to go missing in the woods. People don't quite comprehend that, like, people can just step off a trail 10 meters or so and go missing forever. Like, just get totally lost. So it wouldn't be
definitely
an unreasonable assumption if someone went missing in the woods to say that they just sort of got lost and died. I mean, it's like
you go from like you go from like the north of Alaska all the way down through Canada to like the southern border with the States, and you have like thousands of miles of just nothing. Forest. They were both in the military, which is interesting.
Oh, are they both in the were they both in the military? I thought it was just Israel Keys, but that is interesting.
Well, Israel Keys was more of a like he kind of guy. Like he actually knew what he was doing. I think Robert Hansen was just he had a couple of like years in the reserves or whatever.
Yeah. He had Israel Keys definitely had some like pretty specialized military training. I guess like it would make sense that people who want to commit murders would be attracted to a military career because you can have your murders sanctioned by the government, I guess, in some ways.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, wasn't there just a case recently where you had this guy admitting to just shooting Afghani civilians just for the hell of it in the military, U.S. military?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, soldiers will admit that a lot. Regretfully.
Yeah, the nature of the occupation, I guess, it makes sense that people who would be attracted to that sort of lifestyle would want to join. So it's not surprising, I guess. But the strangest part about Israel Keys, in my opinion, he didn't have a pattern in terms of victims. It was so generally serial killers will have a certain type of person that they kill, right?
Yeah, a victim profile.
Yeah. So, like, he didn't have anything particularly. He would kill old couples, young women, adult males, pretty much just hunted purely for the sport of it and his own sadistic pleasure, basically. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
So he was caught, and he was somehow able to commit suicide while on suicide watch because a guard accidentally gave him a razor, which I find pretty strange, I guess.
What happened? What? Sorry, someone accidentally gave him a.
Yeah, a guard accidentally gave him a razor, and he was able to kill himself under suicide watch.
Yeah, it probably had some sympathizer of some sort.
Yeah, probably something like that. So this guy had murder caches all over the country, right? With firearms, chemical zip ties, other sort of equipment like that that would help in like a murder, basically. And
Holy shit.
Yeah, he was pretty scarily organized like that. And I guess that's what leads a lot of people to come to the conclusion that it can't have just been this one guy going out and killing people, you know? They it might have been like a collective thing. So so some
of the murder kits he would hide, he wouldn't use for like years.
Yeah,
come back.
It's so weird to me that the forward thinking in that regard. It's I guess some of it can be explained by his military career, that he would have, I guess, plans, be able to plan ahead in that sort of scenario. But anyway, it's a frequent fixture of FBI reports of Alaskan Native women and foreign women that are found out in the middle of nowhere, dead, often mutilated, skinned, or with trophies taken off their bodies. So this is something that, separate from those two cases, that does happen, right?
The Valley of Tears, or whatever, the Highway of Tears. It's a highway that goes from like British Columbia up to Alaska. Has a lot. Might be separate from what you're talking about, but there's this stretch of highway in British Columbia that kind of goes up to towards Alaska, and there's lots of missing Native women, and they suspect a serial killer.
Yeah, no,
Uh,
that's totally connected to that, I'd say.
yeah.
So it makes sense that this is a type of victims they'd be finding, because I guess if they were carefully selected, again, it's going to be people like if they're foreign, well, if they can't be identified, then there's not much that can be done. And
Hmm.
if I guess natives would tend to be like, I guess, a bit more remote as well, and probably
Hmm.
not as close to other, interconnected with other parts of the civilization that they could like report anything to. So they have the FBI has actually thought since the 70s that there are companies that one could hire that would take you on a guided tour and charter a plane to take people to kill Native women. And there was a famous criminal profiler who first linked all these dead bodies to a known serial killer, and he's the one who believed that this was the case. So,
Hmm.
and when he was caught, he talked about his chartered hunting trips and said he didn't always go alone. So this is Robert Hansen, right? And
Hmm.
this leaves a possibility that he would literally have people pay to come with him and hunt humans. So there have been hundreds of other dead bodies found with similar mutilations in similar patterns. Since he was caught, the cases have not been cracked. So they don't get solved because many of the women are not reported missing by their families or are foreign nationals that they aren't able to be identified. They are also often prostitutes or people that don't people don't really care about when they go missing. So
Hmm.
I guess the whole allure of this situation is just sort of like it would be really easy to, well, not easy, but it would Alaska would be the ideal place for this sort of activity, right? I mean,
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
so secluded from the rest of, I guess, civilization that you aren't really, uh, you're not as interconnected with the rest of the world. I mean,
Hmm.
so I'd
Especially if
say,
you have a goddamn airplane, you can land anywhere.
what? Sorry.
Especially if you have a friggin' air, like a seaplane or whatever. Did the airplane that Israel Case have, was it like a seaplane?
Robert Hansen had like a Cessna, like a small little.
Or sorry,
Yeah,
yeah,
it was Hansen that had the plane they would fly in with,
plane, yeah.
and so one can truly just kind of fade into the Yukon and be just off the grid, right? If you are sketchy in any way, that's obviously desirable. It's
Hmm.
a truly rough place, and no one gives a second look to fringy, isolated people, right? I mean,
Hmm.
I guess by the nature of the area being so isolated, I guess it would attract a lot of those types, right? So it's much easier to fly under the radar there because during the summer there are cash jobs that are decent paying, the fishing boats and some logging. The rest of the year, people
Hmm.
can just kind of lie low and do whatever. So
So there's lots of people coming in and out of.
yes, exactly. So there's not, uh, it's not always a stable population, I guess you could say. Yeah, it's very much a place people fly in, fly out sort of jobs. People can live spaced out so far apart that it's hard to know what your neighbor is up to, and it's really cold for a lot of the year that no one really cares what you're doing. So there are about 10 men for every woman, which I found quite interesting. So in Alaska,
Really?
yes, there are the male population far outweighs the female population. I don't know if it's 10 to 1, but it's like it
It
is.
was surprising to you when you read it.
Yes.
Hmm.
Uh you I guess logically that kind of makes sense if it's mostly like manual labor jobs that are on offer, so people will fly in to do that. So, but still quite odd. So, I think a disproportionate number of women there are prostitutes as well, far from their families, who could go missing for a while and no one would really notice, right? So, this is quoting a movie, but I thought it was a pretty good quote. If you weren't born in Alaska, you live here because you're running away from something. That seems remarkably true to me. So even with the oil fields, the people who work there, like you were saying, it's a fly in, fly out sort of deal, and so there's, like you said, not a consistent population. Also, it would probably be really, really easy to dispose of a body because of the obvious isolated nature of location and huge areas of forest. And I mean, so how much I know you're in Canada, right? And
Yeah.
how far does a forest extend? Like, just
Oh God, like pretty much except for like the prairies where there's like a kind of like a large square of flat prairie land. Pretty much, literally, the whole country is covered in huge, forests where no one's ever stepped. Most Canadians live right near the border of the U.S. So
right in like large
yeah,
city clusters, right? Urban. Is it mainly an urban
yeah,
population?
yeah. I mean, there's people live. The vast majority of Canadians, I think they're like within like some like short distance from the American border. I can't remember what it is, but
Right.
yeah,
Well,
anyone that looks
that would
at
make sense given the history of the place, right? Because Canada was formed of like what, people who were loyal to the empire, right?
yeah, the British.
So
Yeah,
Americans.
90% of Canadians live within 100 miles of the U.S. borders.
Wow. I guess it's
Yeah,
kind of like us with our coasts. That most of the population is sort of centered around the coastal areas, right? So
yeah, yeah. If people listening, if you Google like this is how empty Canada really is in Google Image, and there's this image, and it's pretty amazing to look at. Definitely a lot of places where you can just vanish, to
yeah,
say the least.
I'll I'll see if I can link that in the show notes. But that sort of, to me, it explains part of like the missing 411 phenomenon. So are you familiar with missing 411?
I don't think so.
Okay, so it's a work of this one guy, David Paulides, who has these volumes of these books, right?
Hmm.
And he used to actually be a Bigfoot guy, right? So
Did
he
you
would.
know that there are different
Oh
grades of
shit!
windshield glass? Here,
What the hell is
Speed
that?
Glass. We use only certified
What the
OEE
hell's going
windshields.
on?
Meaning, we use auto glass made in the same factories as
Ah,
the original windshield.
Okay,
sorry.
that's okay. So, uh, apparently we are being haunted by the ghost of Autoglass.
Yeah, that was
Once
weird.
again,
She started randomly.
the most haunted, cursed podcast on the internet. Anyway,
Yeah.
so
Sorry, continue.
David Paulides, right? He used to be actually a Bigfoot guy, right? So one of these guys who would like, quote unquote, investigate Bigfoot, right? And he also worked as a police officer. And he noticed how you had these clusters around national parks, specifically in North America, where people would just sort of go missing, right? But
Yeah.
and while there is some stuff to that can't be explained. Like, I'll probably end up talking about this again in another episode, but because it's so crazy. But hundreds of thousands of people have vanished over I don't know how long a time, but like something
Isn't
like
Yellowstone Park has something?
yes, a lot
like
around Yellowstone Park and those sorts of areas where people will just sort of go missing, or even young children will, I guess you sort of expect, but a lot of young children go missing. But the odd thing about it is what you see is people who shouldn't be capable of going such a distance in such a short amount of time, just sort of, if they are recovered, being really far away from the starting point they were at, right? So you would get like little kids who had been left alone for like 2 seconds, disappeared, and a couple hours later they're on the other side of a mountain range, for example. Something like that shouldn't be possible.
Yeah.
Right, so that's sort of a whole...
very paranormal.
Yeah, certainly. And while he's a Bigfoot guy, he doesn't really talk about... He doesn't suggest that it's any sort of cryptid or anything. He just sort of presents the information, and he doesn't even have a explanation himself as to why it is. He just collects all this data, and there's almost... It's very hard to find a pattern in the data other than people en masse go missing around national parks, right? But I think part of that, at least part of that, can be explained by the fact we were talking about earlier, that people do just go missing in highly wooded areas, right? It's so easy. I mean, it's like the same reason they have like Brothers Grimm tales, right? In Germany, around the Black Forest area, right? Because it's super easy to just get lost and not be found again, especially for a little kid. You get lost in the forest for a day and you're basically, especially in certain seasons, you're just frozen to death. You're dead, right? So I think part of that can be the missing 411 can be explained by that, and I think probably some of missing 411 can also be explained by this phenomenon, because if you think about it, if you were to someone who desired killing people, it would be the ideal scenario to go after people who are in an isolated area, especially if they're alone. And we're for real back this time.
Yes.
Okay. So, as I was gonna say before, like 10 minutes ago, my god-awful Australian internet decided that it wouldn't work. Like, I don't know, maybe a kangaroo ate the copper wiring to our house or something.
Yes, there you go.
Or a drop bear was, I don't know, horrifically mangled the copper wiring, something like that, because it wasn't working well for a moment there. So, 5 out of every 1,000 people go missing in Alaska every year.
Wow.
Yeah, man, it's pretty crazy, and basically Alaska isn't a fun place to be whatsoever. And, so, you know, if you've ever thought about going just, I guess, to your north and chilling there for a bit, not such a good idea. It's, I guess, like, kind of the opposite of Canada if you think about it. Like, from what I've been reading, it's just full of really nasty people. Well,
yeah.
So yeah. Anyway.
And transients.
Yeah, basically. I also found out historically, human hunting occurred during the Spanish Civil War, in which wealthy landowners would go out on horseback to kill landless peasants for sport. And they would just dump their bodies in mass graves, just for kicks, I guess.
Yeah, part of that whole white terror thing.
Anyway,
yeah.
On a slightly lighter note than companies that will charge you out to kill humans and organized hunting of landless peasants in Spain, here's an article I found on some website called Deadspin. Now, when I was trying to find stuff for this, I think it's like one of those really cancerous websites that it's the same owner as Gizmodo and Kotaku and that sort of crap. So
Okay.
but it was just so funny that I couldn't quite pass it by. If you've always wanted to hunt a live human, here's your willing prey. Okay, so this here's the tale of a fella who calls himself Mork and Encino. Okay, so I'm just gonna state from the outset that this story is like, obviously this was set up as a joke, but it's just too funny to me. So Mork, he has faith in his skills as they apply to both eluding and surviving. He launched a website about it on June 20th. It's called Hunt Me for Sport. As of last night, there were 21 pictures of him sporting overalls in various poses, hiding behind trees or brush, showing off his new red earwear, sitting in a strategic fetal position. So, here's the offer. I seek hearty gents who fancy themselves sportsmen and bored of the usual game. I am a new breed of prey with thick pelt and smooth hide. I'm faster than a wild turkey, smart as any goddamn wild boar, and willing to make the ultimate sacrifice for the monetary health of my family. If I am trapped and killed, you stand to earn the respect of your fellow hunters, a prize human mount for your wall, and all income from any organ harvest. For this, I ask for a reasonable sum of $10,000 per hunter per round. I will be armed only with my wits and the clothes on my back. Naked is plus $2,000 per hour per round. A round is a day. A round is a day's hunt, so 24 hours. I will not attempt self-defense. I will only seek to evade capture. In the event of my demise, all payment will default to my family. So I just found that pretty hilarious. That was
Wait, so he's offering to be hunted?
Yes. So
That's hilarious.
that's an article from back in 2011. It's one of those kind of clickbaity trash articles, but I just found it so funny that I couldn't possibly.
You know, it probably wouldn't be that hard to get away from somebody if just for 24 hours.
Yeah. Probably not, man.
You could just fucking just sprint in a direction, and you don't have to worry about getting lost or going the wrong, I don't know.
Probably wouldn't be such a bad deal if they were just armed with rifles and whatnot. So yeah. So I agree with you. So maybe it wouldn't be such a bad scheme. Although I'm not entirely sure of the legality surrounding being willingly hunted. It kind of reminds me of, obviously that was a jerk. He wasn't actually offering to be hunted, but it reminds me
It does raise an interesting question.
It does, and it's a question that's had to be answered a couple times, because especially when you had the case of the guy in Germany who had a person willing to be cannibalized, and he killed this guy who was willing to be killed and cannibalized, and ate him. And
in Germany?
Yes, Armin...
Deutschland.
Yes, I think his name was Armin something, and
yes, that sounds familiar.
Armin Muse or something, and he killed this guy who was a willing participant and ate him. And it was a big legal fiasco in Germany because they didn't know how you would even deal with someone being consenting to being killed and eaten. So they had to introduce new policy and everything to actually charge the guy with anything. So anyway,
yeah, he's in prison.
Yeah, he is in prison now, but before that they were just like, well, what the hell do we even do? Because I think they did end up charging him with murder. But
yeah, because the guy he killed probably isn't all there mentally.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that's a fair statement to make. I don't think that's unreasonable. Anyway, I think that just about wraps it up then. There you go. Human hunting. Are there companies out there that'll take you to hunt humans? Probably. Humans are sick. Anyway, hopefully another episode gets released next Sunday. If not, it's because Patrick is asleep. Anyway.
Yeah.